On August 28, 1986, people filled theaters to watch a film that many had been waiting 12 whole years for. That movie? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And their reactions were mixed at best. For a lot of people, this was just not what they were expecting. Tonally, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Parts 1 and 2 could not be further apart. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a brutal, dark film that was grounded in reality, taking elements of inspiration from the serial killer Ed Gein as well as some other real-life murders. It's a film that forever changed the horror genre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 took the brutality of the first and amped it way up with much more in-your-face gore, and at the same time, it seasoned it with a lot of very dark and also kinda wacky humor. And if you know me, you're probably thinking, oh, Justin loves this film, doesn't he? And you'd be right, this was pretty much the movie that introduced me to the concept of a very dark, very gruesome horror comedy. And one of the most interesting things to me about this movie was the character Choptop, Leatherface's brother who's introduced in this movie. A psychotic Vietnam vet who is wounded in combat. And now he habitually scrapes at the metal plate in his head with a coat hanger. I always thought it seemed like there was so much more to this character's story than what we actually saw in the movie. And clearly I wasn't the only one who thought this way. You see, at some point there was a plan to make a Texas Chainsaw Massacre spin-off that was all about Choptop, and although being mostly completed, it has never seen the light of day. So for this video, let's take a look at All-American Massacre. This video is brought to you by Shudder. Shudder is my absolute favorite streaming service. It's basically the Netflix of horror movies. It has so many of my favorite movies as well as just a lot of movies that manage to fly underneath my radar. Like I just watched Class of 1984, which is a brutal revenge film that I instantly fell in love with. And Liquid Sky, which I couldn't stop thinking about after watching to the point where I might actually make a video about it. For $5.99 a month or $56.99 a year, you get access to Shudder's library ad-free on all of your favorite devices. So get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content. Shudder's expertly curated collection includes titles like the acclaimed Tigers Are Not Afraid, One Cut of the Dead, Revenge, and the Creepshow TV series produced by Greg Nicotero and based on the famous films by George Romero. To try Shudder free for 30 days, just go to shudder.com and use code WANG. That's SHUDDER.com.
Lick my plate, you dog dick!
To tell the story of All-American Massacre, let's start with Bill Mosely. Bill Mosely is an actor who a lot of you probably just know as Otis from Rob Zombie's trilogy, House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and Three from Hell. But for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans, you probably know him as Choptop. And Bill's journey as an actor is intrinsically linked to this character. As a young actor, Bill found himself trying to get the attention of Saturday Night Live. And part of him pursuing Saturday Night Live involved him creating a parody short film entitled The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film has also never been released, but in it, Leatherface visits a salon in Staten Island. At the salon, he chops a woman's fingers off with a chainsaw, you get it? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This film did not get him on Saturday Night Live, but he would keep it with him and occasionally show it to people. And one friend that he happened to show it to was acquainted with Tobe Hooper, who you might know as the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So the friend shows it to Tobe, who goes on to get in contact with Bill Mosely and tells him, hey, if I ever work on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I'll keep you in mind. A few years passed with no contact between Bill or Tobe, but then all of a sudden, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is happening. Bill gets a call, and the rest is history. Choptop, originally known as Platehead, is born. And to really understand why Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is the way that it is, we had to look at where Tobe Hooper was coming from at the time. In the years since Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper had made quite a few films, probably most famously Poltergeist. And when the time came for him to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, what he really wanted to do was make a dark comedy. He felt that those elements were always there in the original movie, but they mostly went ignored by the people who saw it. So this time, he was going to kick it up a notch. And wouldn't you know it, the movie comes out and it's panned by critics, and if you're a horror fan, you know that you can't really go by what the critics say, especially if they're not horror genre enthusiasts. And with that on mind, both Choptop and the movie itself would go on to develop large cult followings following its VHS release. But Choptop himself would mostly vanish from the series, which I guess kinda makes sense because at the end of the second movie, spoiler alert, he falls presumably to his death. He doesn't appear in any of the sequels, nor does he appear in any of the other media associated with the series. But that doesn't mean that the character would disappear altogether. Choptop was kept alive through Bill Mosely's collaboration with the musician Buckethead.
It goes like this!
First with guest appearances on Buckethead's solo album Giant Robot, and later as a part of a project they made together, Corn Bugs. Still, despite the character living on through Bill Mosely's personal projects, it seemed like he would never make another on-screen appearance. This all changes with the conversation that Bill Mosely had with Tobe Hooper's son, William Tony Hooper. Bill had kept in touch with Tony throughout the years, and now Tony was trying to get work doing special effects in movies. To help him get these jobs, he wanted to put together a quick short film. So he pitched an idea to Bill, a 10-minute short entitled All-American Massacre. In All-American Massacre, it would be revealed that Choptop survived after the events of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. He was now in prison and a journalist goes to interview him. And it's through the interviews that we learn Choptop's backstory. And as I said before, it always seemed like there was a lot to work with for Choptop's backstory that we just didn't see in his first appearance. Bill was into the idea and he had also hoped that this collaboration would also open him up to working with Tobe Hooper again. At this point in his career, Bill hadn't been getting that much work, so he was looking for any good opportunities that he could. And thus, production on All-American Massacre began in 1999. What was meant to be a 10-minute short quickly expands into a 60-minute project. A project that now includes Mosely's pal Buckethead swapping out one mask for the other and playing the role of Leatherface, as well as contributing the soundtrack. And things seem to be going well. A website is created for the film, and a trailer is released. And on August 16th of 2000, a press release by the film's publicist Stu Carney, an alias of its producer Eric Lasher, set a release date for Halloween of that year. But then, Halloween comes and goes and there's no movie. The website continues to be updated all the way through 2008 before ultimately redirecting to a perpetually under construction page for Abominable Entertainment, presumably Tony Hooper's production company. If anything substantial was added during this phase of the website, it's hard to tell because it was made in Flash. And as you might know, Flash didn't get archived like a regular website. There's so much good content from the early to mid 2000s that's just completely gone because of so many people making Flash websites. I remember getting in arguments about this so much during these days. People would tell me, oh, you gotta have your website be in Flash. This is the wave of the future. And look where it got us. I maintained that Apple's greatest contribution to human society was killing the Flash website. But anyway, with people getting dragged along for years and years about this film's release, a lot of theories started to form about why it didn't come out. One that I recalled reading about was that Jim Sido, who had played the old man, Drayton Sawyer, in the first two movies, incidentally a character played by Bill Mosely in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, was going to reprise his role in this film. But then he passed away before they were able to film his scene, and it kinda knocked the wind out of the sails. When I was researching this video though, I couldn't seem to dig up any of the accounts that I had seen previously, so maybe I'm just remembering that theory incorrectly. And of course, the most prevailing theory about why this movie never came out was about the ownership of the rights. Tobe Hooper didn't own the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so he wouldn't have been able to grant them to his son to use. And these rights had actually changed hands a lot throughout the years, but depending on how it worked, if they had just put it out as a fan project and not charged for it, it might have been easy to get away with it. And another common theory was simply that after the release of Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, a complete abomination of a movie, Tobe Hooper simply didn't want to further taint his father's work. However, in the years since, all of these theories have been dismissed. According to Tobe Hooper himself, the reason why this movie didn't come out was simply that there wasn't enough money to finish it. So in May of 2011, Tobe launched a Kickstarter to fund the completion of this movie. He planned to make it available as a free download that July, but unfortunately the Kickstarter failed to reach its goal. On June 13th, at the conclusion of the campaign, he made a post thanking the people who contributed, and stated his intent to finish the movie even if it takes a little bit longer to get it out. But once again, years would pass with no movie. To my knowledge, the very last push to fund this thing was made in August of 2016. In August of 2016, the long under construction webpage of Abominable Pictures finally became available. A donation link was added, as well as a Patreon. Unfortunately, the Patreon no longer exists and it hasn't been archived, so there's no telling if any materials were actually released through it. But judging by the fact that the movie still hasn't been released, I don't think the Patreon was that successful. But all that being said, this thing has been in the works for a really long time. At this point, over 20 years, and it's not as if it's been completely abandoned. I mean, there's been quite a few attempts to resurrect it by its creator. What's going on here that we still don't have a movie? According to an interview that Bill Mosely did with Rue Morgue in 2016, it sounds like a tale that's as old as time. A tale that many a Kickstarter backer is all too familiar with. People start working on a project, time goes on, and it's going well, but then all of a sudden the vision just gets bigger and bigger, and it just stops being feasible to achieve what they want. Reading the interview, it reminds me so much about what happened with Barkley 2. But that being said, Bill does quip in it that maybe we will actually see it someday. And that being said, there have been rumors throughout the years of copies of the finished film floating around and whatnot, but I don't necessarily believe that, considering that if there were, I feel like they would have been on YouTube by now. Although in 2013, there was an incident where a Storage Wars type dude yipped his way into getting something a little special. An abandoned locker belonging to Eric Lasher, who you might remember was the producer of the movie. What was in that locker? 35mm film, high 8 tapes, and negatives from the production of All American Massacre. So he took his bounty and threw it up on eBay. Nobody knows who won the auction, and it doesn't seem like anything has been leaked from this find, but that being said, something did emerge earlier this year. While looking through a compilation of Buckethead footage in March of 2020, a Twitter user named LeatherFave discovered something. Previously unknown footage from All American Massacre showing part of Buckethead as Leatherface. This is footage that doesn't appear in the movie trailer, and I doubt it came from the eBay auction. Most likely, it seems like it's maybe something that Buckethead himself released, or maybe it was something that was on the lost Flash version of the website. But as of now, this is all we have of the film. Just hold out hope that we see the whole thing someday. And with all that being said, what about the future of the character Choptop? According to an interview that Bill Mosely did earlier this year with, let me make sure I pronounce this correctly, Sofa King Cool magazine, he would love to play the role one time, but the ownership issue once again is a problem. As of right now, he believes that the character Choptop is owned by Sony. He floated the idea of attempting to purchase the character himself, but he's not exactly sure what that would entail or how much it would cost. On the interviewer's suggestion, Bill said that he might be open to the idea of simply crowdfunding the purchase of the rights. Considering how much I'd like to see the character get officially revived, and I don't see Sony ever actually making a Choptop movie, this is definitely a crowdfunding thing that I would personally get behind. But anyway, that's all for now. If you like this video, you'll probably also like my video about the troubled Kickstarter of Barkley 2. I'm out.